The electricity had gone out shortly before dawn, leaving the apartment in a pale blue half-darkness. Anna moved through the kitchen by memory, touching corners of chairs and edges of cabinets, reaching for where the kettle should be. The air felt colder than usual. The blackout had silenced the radiators. As she turned toward the table, she stopped. Sergei's briefcase sat open. Not simply opened as though someone had looked for something in haste, but opened with a deliberate neatness she had never seen from him. Papers were arranged in a careful fan. The clasp lay flat on the table as if positioned intentionally rather than dropped. A thin layer of frost on the inside of the window gave the table a muted glow, highlighting the single object placed on top. A visitor pass. She leaned closer. The pass bore a red stripe along one edge and the name of a building she did not recognize. Most ministry offices she knew by rumor or necessity, but this one, Block 17 Northern Annex, meant nothing. The date was stamped for the previous night. Sergei had returned late, claiming a meeting. He hadn't mentioned any annex. She touched the pass only with her fingertips as though it might stain her. It was still slightly warm, unusual for a card left in an unheated kitchen during a blackout. That meant it had been placed recently. She looked toward the hallway. Sergei was still asleep. She closed the briefcase gently and stood still, listening to the apartment. The pipes were quiet. Outside, someone trudged down the stairwell with heavy boots, the sound echoing through the concrete. She went to the window and wiped a small circle in the frost with her sleeve. Across the courtyard, the light in the neighbor Vera's kitchen was already on. It was always on too early. Vera noticed everything. A phone's distant ring startled her, the communal line on the landing. She stepped into the corridor and listened. The ring paused, resumed, then stopped abruptly just as Sergei's footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. He stood in the doorway of the apartment, still in his undershirt, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "Is something wrong?" he asked. She kept her voice even. "The phone. It stopped the moment you came out." He shrugged. "Probably a crossed line again. They've been repairing something downstairs." His voice was careful calm, the way he spoke when choosing each word. He looked past her toward the kitchen. "Did the power go out?" "Yes. Early." He nodded and returned to the kitchen. She followed a step behind. He closed the briefcase with a quick movement, almost too quick, then checked the clasp. "I have to leave early today," he said. "There are reports due. The blackout will complicate things." She watched as he put on his shirt. His fingers trembled slightly while buttoning the cuffs. Normally he worked with precise, steady gestures. This morning they faltered. When he stepped away to wash, she opened the drawer beside the stove. The envelopes inside were undisturbed, but the small key she kept beneath them was slightly out of its usual position, angled instead of flat. Someone had handled it. She closed the drawer quietly. Sergei returned within minutes, dressed for work. "I'll be back late," he said. "Don't wait for dinner." She nodded. He brushed past her, picked up his briefcase, and left. The door latch clicked sharply, echoing through the apartment. After he was gone, Anna sat at the table. The kettle waited unboiled in the cold kitchen. She placed her hands flat on the wood palms, warming slowly. Her eyes settled on the mark the visitor pass had left a faint outline where condensation had gathered. She traced it once with her thumb. Down in the stairwell, voices rose and fell quickly, then quieted. She imagined someone standing there in the early dark, waiting on the landing each time Sergei left for work. Kolya had once mentioned seeing a man there on Thursdays, but she had dismissed it as a child's imagination. Now she wasn't sure. Outside the courtyard, lights flickered back to life as the power returned. The apartment brightened, revealing every detail of the kitchen. It made the briefcase's earlier arrangement seem even more unnatural, too. Careful, too intentional, too unlike her husband. A small shiver ran through her. Not from the cold this time. She reached for the kettle, but before turning it on, she paused again, listening. The building had gone unusually quiet. It felt as though someone was still watching. The next morning unfolded with a muted tension that lingered beneath the routine motions of preparing the children for school. Anna tied Misha's scarf, straightened Kolya's collar, and checked the apartment windows before leaving. Sergei had departed an hour earlier, slipping out quietly while the children were still half asleep. She had listened to the way his steps hesitated at the door, as if checking whether she might follow. She had pretended not to notice. In the stairwell, cold air pooled near the lower steps. The building's concrete always held the night's chill. As they descended, Misha darted ahead, boots tapping an uneven rhythm. Kolya kept closer to Anna, glancing toward the landings above them. His eyes settled briefly on the second-floor bend. Then he spoke in a low voice. "He was there again," Kolya said. "Who?" Anna asked, keeping her tone light. "The man with the gray coat. Thursdays. Always Thursdays." He hesitated. "Papa talked to him once." Her grip tightened on the handrail, but she forced her voice into stillness. When Kolya shrugged, shifting his satchel. "Early morning, before school. I didn't hear what they said." They continued downward. On the ground floor, the security lamp buzzed faintly. Anna pushed open the building door and cold air swept around them. She walked the boys to the schoolyard, watching as they disappeared into the crowd of uniforms. When they were out of sight, she didn't head home immediately. Instead, she stood near the edge of the courtyard where the view of their building remained clear. The man might still be there. She waited, pretending to examine a posted announcement. After several minutes, she saw movement near the stairwell door, a man stepping out into the open. His coat was exactly as Kolya described, gray wool slightly worn at the shoulders, with the collar turned up despite the mild wind. He didn't look toward the school or the street. He scanned the windows of the building, then walked quickly toward the tram stop. Anna followed at a distance. She kept several people between them, using their movement as cover. The man boarded a tram heading north. She hesitated before stepping on. But once inside, she took a seat where the reflection allowed her to watch him indirectly. He kept his head turned slightly away from the aisle, a gesture that looked practiced rather than casual. He exited 3 stops later near an older district lined with ministry buildings. She followed on foot as he approached a narrow alley. Sergei stood there half-shielded behind a parked delivery truck. Anna froze. Her breath caught in the cold air, forming a small cloud. Sergei's posture was rigid. The gray-coated man handed him a slim envelope, no larger than the ones used for medical receipts. Sergei slipped it into his briefcase without opening it. They exchanged only a few words before separating, each walking off without a backward glance. Anna remained hidden behind the entrance to a bakery, pretending to adjust her glove. Her heartbeat pulsed in her fingertips. Sergei turned into a side street and disappeared among the morning workers. The gray-coated man walked in the opposite direction, taking measured, confident steps as if certain no one would follow. She waited until both were gone before exhaling. Her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the bakery wall until the shaking eased. Back home, warmth had seeped back into the radiators. She removed her coat, slowly replaying what she had seen. The envelope had no markings she could see from her distance. It was passed with a smooth familiarity. Neither man displayed surprise, tension, or urgency, as though it was a routine, a ritual. On the kitchen table, a faint ring remained where the visitor pass had rested the previous morning. She placed her fingertips over it, half expecting the outline to feel warm again. Instead, it was cool. She opened the drawer where she kept the envelopes and again noticed the key resting at an odd angle. She flattened it gently. Something in the apartment had shifted in these last 2 days. Habits rearranged details slightly wrong, as if Sergei had begun moving through the rooms with a different purpose. A soft knock came at the door. Anna startled, then listened. It was a single knock, too soft to be the postman. She approached slowly, looking through the peephole. Vera stood in the dim hallway, arms folded. She offered a thin smile. "I saw you leave early," she said through the door. "And I noticed Sergei left even earlier." "Everything all right?" Anna forced her voice steady. "Yes. Just errands." Vera nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the stairwell as if expecting someone else to appear. "Strange week," she murmured. "People coming and going. Unusual for this building." Anna didn't respond. After a moment, Vera stepped back. "If you need anything, you know where I am." When the door closed, Anna leaned against it, eyes shut. The quiet of the apartment felt heavier, as though the walls had pulled in. The image of the envelope exchange lingered brightly in her mind. She opened her eyes, feeling the first edge of fear sharpen into something more deliberate. There were patterns here: Thursday mornings, briefcase arrangements, early departures. And now an exchange in an alley. She could no longer pretend these were coincidences. Anna spent most of the afternoon pretending to perform ordinary tasks. She folded laundry that didn't need folding, moved dishes from one cabinet to another, checked the windows twice despite knowing they were latched. The apartment felt too quiet when the children were at school, a quiet that pressed against the walls. Each sound from the stairwell made her pause. Twice she thought she heard footsteps stop outside the door, only for them to continue down to the landing below. By early evening, she finally sat at Sergei's small writing desk. He used it rarely, preferring to keep his work locked in his briefcase, but a few documents were always left behind. Mundane things, harmless things. She thumbed through them, slowly, expecting nothing. But then she noticed a pair of typewritten letters, both from the ministry office Sergei claimed to work for. The headers were identical, the stamp dates only 2 weeks apart. She laid them side by side and read carefully. One letter listed Sergei as part of Committee Section 4. The other referred to him as attached to Section 2. The signature on each came from the same administrator but was visibly different. Same name, different slope of handwriting, different pressure on the pen. Her pulse quickened. She held the papers at the edge, not wanting her fingertips to smudge anything. This wasn't a simple clerical error. 2 inconsistent classifications in such short proximity meant something else entirely. A misalignment, a contradiction, a lie. She set the letters down, smoothing the corners. Behind the desk near the baseboard, a faint scuff mark caught her eye. She knelt, lifting the hem of the curtain. A thin metal box sat pushed against the wall, barely visible unless one crouched. Dust gathered around it, except for a clean arc on one side where someone's hand had recently pulled it out and returned it. She hesitated, listening for any movement in the building. Then she slid the box out. It was heavier than expected, more weight than a few papers would allow. She lifted the lid. Empty. But the inside had faint impressions, as if objects had rested there for a long time. Something rectangular. Something folded. Something metallic. Whatever had been hidden here was now elsewhere. She closed the box quietly, pushing it back exactly where she found it. On impulse, she checked the drawer beside the bed, the one Sergei rarely used. She removed the stack of shirts. Underneath, taped to the underside of the drawer base, she found a small key. The tape had peeled slightly on one corner, showing it had been handled recently. Anna pulled it off carefully. The key was small, brass-colored, the kind used for personal lockers or small safes. She held it in her palm for several seconds before slipping it into her pocket. A key meant a lock. A lock meant something specific, something he needed separation from the house to access. She wondered if the metal box she had found was part of that system, a removable container for items he didn't want here at night. The stairwell door slammed somewhere below. Anna stiffened. Voices followed, muffled, tense, unclear. The sound of someone turning sharply on their heel carried up the concrete shaft. She moved to the apartment door and listened. Footsteps approached, then paused. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the footsteps retreated. She exhaled slowly. At dinner, the children talked about school. Anna watched Sergei's place at the table remain empty. His absence had become predictable. She tried to eat, but found the food tasteless. After the boys went to bed, she sat alone in the dim living room. The lamp cast a narrow cone of light over the letters she had laid out again. She compared them once more, stamps, signatures, formatting. None of it matched. Sometime after 9, the phone rang. She answered, but only silence met her. A soft clicking sound followed, then the line dropped. She replaced the receiver gently. Moments later, Sergei arrived home. He hung his coat without looking at her and placed the briefcase by the door. She studied the angle at which he set it down, deliberate again, too exact. He noticed her gaze. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Anna kept her voice steady. "I went through some of the letters on your desk." A long pause stretched between them. He stepped forward, eyes tired but alert. "Those are old assignments," he said. "Clerical mistakes. They contradict each other." "Yes," he said quietly. "They do. Nothing more." He walked past her, heading toward the kitchen. As he moved, she saw him touch his pocket lightly, ensuring something was still there. She realized then that whatever had once been inside that metal box was now with him, and he was waiting for the right moment to move it again. The letter arrived just after dawn, slipped beneath the apartment door with a soft scrape that woke Anna before the children. The hallway outside was still dim. Only the thin line of winter light through the window at the end of the corridor illuminated the envelope on the floor. She picked it up carefully. The paper was heavier than usual, thick, official, unmistakable before she even read the header. Housing Committee Notice of Inquiry. Her breath tightened. The letter was addressed jointly to Sergei Petrov, resident, and Anna Petrovna, household associate. The wording alone unsettled her. Ordinarily, they used spouse, but the committee chose terms deliberately signaling distance or suspicion with the slightest shift in phrasing. She unfolded the letter at the kitchen table. The inquiry concerned inconsistencies in employment documentation connected to Sergei's status in the building's residency file. They requested clarification at an upcoming review meeting. The tone was polite, but beneath the politeness lay something colder. Committees never asked questions they didn't already know the answers to. Sergei entered the kitchen moments later, tie half-knotted hair still damp. He paused when he saw the letter in her hands. "When did that come?" he asked. "Just now." He reached for it, but she kept it on the table. A small boundary, but he noticed. His expression didn't change. Only his shoulders lifted in a slight, controlled breath. "It's nothing," he said. "Routine check." Anna watched him reach into his coat. He withdrew a folded copy of a logbook page, yellowed with ink slightly smeared. She recognized the format workplace entry logs. She had seen similar pages once long ago when they applied for the apartment. He laid it flat, smoothing it with 2 fingers. Everything matches. They just need confirmation. But the page looked wrong even at first glance. The timings were too regular, the entries spaced too evenly as if written after the fact. And the signature at the bottom was the same administrator who had signed the contradictory ministry letters. Anna lifted the page. "Why do you have this in your coat?" Sergei met her eyes, steady but guarded. "Because they might ask for it." He reached for the briefcase, opening it to place the log inside. She watched the way his hand hovered over the interior before slipping the page in a slight hesitation, protective as if hiding something deeper within. She recalled the missing items from the metal box, the key in her pocket, the envelope exchange. A shape of truth was forming, indistinct but unmistakable. He closed the briefcase sharply. "I have to go," he said. "Don't worry about the committee. I'll handle it." He left before she could speak again. After the door shut, the apartment felt hollow. She laid the logbook copy beside the committee letter. Together, the two documents formed a pattern, one that suggested the committee already suspected what the logbook attempted to cover. By late morning, the building felt restless. Neighbors moved through the stairwell more than usual. Anna heard hushed conversations near the mailboxes. When she stepped out to collect the boys' winter gloves from the laundry line, she found Vera standing in the corridor, her arms crossed. "You received something today?" Vera said, watching her carefully. "A routine inquiry?" "Nothing here is routine anymore." Vera shifted closer. "People talk about Sergei's hours, about who visits, about the man in the gray coat." She let the words linger. "Committees notice these things." Anna forced a quiet exhale. "We have nothing to hide." Vera smiled gently, almost sympathetically. "Everyone hides something. The question is only whether the right person notices." She walked away, leaving the air colder than before. That evening, Anna cooked without appetite. The boys sensed tension but didn't speak of it. Kolya glanced repeatedly at the door, expecting Sergei. When the lock finally turned after 10, Anna felt her stomach tighten. Sergei entered, looking worn, his scarf heavier with condensation. He said little during dinner, only nodding at the children's stories. When they had gone to bed, he lingered in the living room. Anna sat across from him, the committee letter on the table between them. "Did you go to the building office?" she asked. "Yes." "And?" "They want clarification," he said. "I provided it." She waited. "Is there anything I should know?" A long silence followed. Sergei's gaze drifted to the window where the courtyard lamp illuminated patches of snow. His voice, when it came, was low. "Just answer their questions, simply," he said. Nothing more. It wasn't reassurance. It was instruction. Anna nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the coming days settle around her. On the table, the committee letter remained where she had placed it. Its edges curled slightly in the warmth of the room, as if the paper itself sensed something tightening. And from the stairwell, faint but distinct, Anna heard someone's footsteps stop outside their door, listening, then moving on. The morning after the committee letter, Anna moved through the apartment with deliberate quiet, as if any sudden sound might unsettle something fragile inside the walls. She waited until Sergei and the boys had left before approaching his briefcase. She didn't open it. She wouldn't risk disturbing whatever pattern he guarded so carefully, but she stood beside it long enough to steady her breathing, then turned to the coat rack instead. His winter coat still held the faint smell of cold air. She searched the pockets methodically. Gloves, a transit stub, a folded handkerchief. Then, deep in the inner lining, her fingers touched a stiff corner paper thicker than anything he normally carried. She pulled it out. A photograph. The image was small, printed on thin, glossy stock. It showed Sergei standing near a gate of a compound she didn't recognize, fenced with a guard post partially visible at the edge of the frame. He wasn't posing. His head was slightly turned, as if speaking to someone outside the viewfinder. The photograph had been taken without his awareness. Behind him, the structures looked industrial, not like ordinary ministry offices. No signage, no street name. Snow accumulated against the fencing in uneven piles, suggesting the photographer had taken the picture from a concealed vantage point. A second object slipped out with it, a development receipt from a small photo shop across the river. Dated last week. Her pulse quickened. Someone had taken this photo. Someone else had developed it. And yet it was in Sergei's coat, meaning either it had been given to him or he had taken it from someone. She set both items on the kitchen table. The photograph seemed to pull the air around it taut. Later, when she walked to the school to bring Misha his forgotten gloves, she saw Vera standing by the heaters near the entrance. Their eyes met briefly. Vera smiled politely, but her gaze slipped to Anna's coat pocket before drifting away. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a kind of checking. Back home, Anna waited until the apartment was quiet again. She paced once around the rooms, stopping near the window overlooking the courtyard. Fresh snow had fallen. The footprints of early morning workers already formed slow-moving lines across the open space. Everything seemed normal, until a soft knock sounded at the door. She froze. It wasn't the postman's knock. It wasn't a neighbor asking for matches. It was too light, measured, deliberate. She approached the door silently and peered through the peephole. A boy from the third floor stood there clutching a folded note. His face was pale as if instructed to come here. When she opened the door, only a fraction, he thrust the note toward her without a word and retreated down the hall. She closed the door quickly. The note contained a single sentence written in hurried pencil. Your husband was seen with different men again. Tell no one. No signature. No date. Just the warning. She folded the note tightly and hid it beneath the vase on the windowsill. Her heartbeat would not settle. The apartment felt as if someone had walked through recently. The air carried a faint disturbance she couldn't name. Hours later, when Kolya returned, he hovered near the table, glancing among the papers she had hurriedly hidden but not forgotten. Finally, he spoke. Papa was outside school last week, he said quietly. Not near the gate, farther away, with 2 men. Did he see you? Kolya nodded. He waved, but he didn't look happy. She pulled him close, though her own hands trembled. The photograph lay in the drawer behind her, its presence like a pulse. That evening, Sergei came home earlier than expected. Snow clung to his coat. His face looked drawn, not exhausted, but stretched thin by decisions he had not yet spoken aloud. He hung his coat with deliberate care. Anna stayed silent, watching. He stepped closer, his gaze sharp. Did anyone come by today? The question felt too precise. Not, did we get mail? Not, did someone visit, but something narrower, more pointed. She kept her voice steady. Only the boy from upstairs. He was delivering something for his mother. Sergei nodded, though his eyes searched her face longer than usual. If anyone asks about my schedule, he said, you know what to say. A quiet, heavy sentence. Not reassurance, not request. Instruction again. Later, when he left the room to prepare for the next day, Anna retrieved the photograph from the drawer. She held it beneath the lamplight, studying the shadows around the compound, the tension in Sergei's posture, the anonymity of the photographer. The questions pressed harder now. Where exactly had this been taken? Who had passed the envelope? And why did someone warn her yet? Urge her to silence? She placed the photograph face down, but the unease remained. And in the stairwell outside, she heard the faint echo of footsteps pausing once more outside their door, longer this time, as if someone was waiting. Anna woke before dawn, unable to return to sleep. The apartment felt restless again, as if something in its structure had shifted during the night. She lay still for several minutes, listening to the faint hum of the radiators, the distant rumble of a tram, the soft breathing of the children in the next room. Sergei was already gone. She hadn't heard him leave. She rose quietly and moved to the living room. The photograph from the day before still lay face down in the drawer, as though turning it over might minimize its weight. But the smallest details lingered in her thoughts. The gate, the guard post, the snowbank at Sergei's side. Places like that didn't appear in official ministry assignments. They belonged to something else entirely. She crossed the room and pulled open the wardrobe near the wall, an older piece of furniture with drawers that stuck in the cold. She tugged one open, then bent to check the floor beneath it. The small metal box she had found earlier still sat against the baseboard. She slid it out again. This time she noticed something she had missed before: faint scrape marks on the back side of the box, tiny grooves where metal had pressed repeatedly against wood. She turned the box over. The underside had a thin seam running across it. She pressed along the seam, and to her astonishment, the bottom panel lifted slightly. A hidden compartment. Her pulse tightened. She eased the panel open. Inside were 3 folded maps, 2 detailing railway lines, one showing the river crossings north of the city. A thin, spiral-bound notebook lay beside them, filled with hand-printed notations, numbers, dates, initials, and strange symbols. And beneath the notebook, wrapped in brown paper, she found a small square of thin acetate negatives. She held them to the window. Silhouettes of fenced compounds and buildings appeared faintly against the morning light. This was no ordinary collection. It was surveillance documents, photographs, routes, coded markings. She replaced the items, carefully returning them in the exact order she found them. Before closing the false bottom, she slipped her hand inside once more, feeling along the interior edges. Something thin and metallic scraped her fingertip. She pinched it and pulled. Another key. Smaller than the first darker metal, the head worn smooth from handling. Its shape suggested it belonged to a locker or a narrow safe, something meant to be opened quickly, discreetly. She stared at it, remembering the envelope exchange, the photograph, the committee letter. A pattern was forming sharper now, no longer just suspicion. A soft tapping startled her. It came not from the door, but from the radiator pipe, as if someone had struck it lightly from another apartment. The rhythm was irregular. Once then, twice, then silence. She waited. A third tap sounded after a long pause. She had heard something similar months ago, Sergei rising in the night, pausing near the vent before returning to bed. She slipped the new key into her pocket. Later in the morning, she walked the children to school. Snow fell in a fine curtain, muting the usual street noise. As they reached the courtyard, she saw the man in the gray coat again standing near the alley by the old bakery. He held no newspaper this time, no briefcase, just his hands tucked into his coat pockets. His gaze flicked briefly toward Sergei's ministry district before turning away. Kolya saw her watching him. "He's there a lot," the boy whispered. She didn't answer. When she returned to the building, Vera stood near the mailboxes, sorting letters with exaggerated care. As Anna passed, Vera's voice drifted softly. "Strange men outside again?" she said without looking up. Different faces. Same pattern. Anna didn't respond. Her pace quickened. Inside the apartment, the air felt colder than the hallway, as though someone had ventilated the room recently. She checked the windows closed, the balcony locked, the bedroom undisturbed. But near the kitchen table, the chair Sergei usually sat in had shifted slightly angled away from the table, as though someone had risen abruptly. The drawer where she kept household envelopes had been left open by a fraction of an inch. She closed it firmly, then listened again to the stillness of the room. By evening, Sergei returned with the same precise movements as every day. But when he removed his coat, she noticed a tension in his jaw, as if he were bracing for something. He set the briefcase on the table and paused, running his thumb slowly along the clasp. "Did anyone come by?" he asked. Anna kept her voice neutral. "No one." He nodded, but the nod was too quick, too practiced. He opened the briefcase just enough to slip something inside, then closed it again, without letting her glimpse the contents. After the children went to bed, he stood by the window watching the courtyard. Snow reflected the weak lamp glow, casting moving shadows as people passed below. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "There may be questions in the coming days. Answer simply. Don't speculate." It was not concern. It was instruction, sharper now, heavier. She watched him from the table, her hand resting lightly over the pocket where the new key lay hidden. He did not know she had seen the maps, the codes, the negatives, and for the first time she realized he might never have intended her to know anything at all. Snow thickened through the night, muffling the building until morning arrived in a gray hush. Anna woke to the sound of something sliding against the floor. At first she thought it was the children moving about, but when she stepped into the hallway she saw the envelope "Pale Official" stamped in red. It had been pushed beneath their door again, not by the Housing Committee this time. State Security Bureau, notice of interview. Her hands trembled before she forced them still. The envelope was addressed to her, not to Sergei. The language was careful, formal, the sort used when summoning someone not yet accused but already under scrutiny. She opened it slowly. The date was set for the next morning. The location, a regional security office she had never visited. The letter asked her to bring identification and any household documents relevant to residency and employment. The phrasing struck her so broad it could include anything so vague it revealed nothing. She read it twice more. The hallway felt colder with the door open. She shut it quickly. When she turned, she found Kolya watching her from the bedroom doorway. "Was that for Papa?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "For me." He stepped closer. "Why?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. He lowered his head, sensing the boundary. Later, after the boys had left for school, Anna prepared tea but did not drink it. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood. The second key lay hidden in her pocket. The first remained taped beneath the drawer where she had found it. She resisted the urge to pull out the metal box again to examine the surveillance negatives until they made sense. Instead, she waited. The apartment felt as if it were listening. Around noon, a noise from the stairwell made her flinch. Two voices, quiet but tense, echoed upward. One belonged to Vera. The other she didn't recognize. Their conversation was clipped purposeful. Anna stepped closer to the door, leaning carefully without letting the floorboards creak. "Said she received a letter," the unfamiliar voice murmured. Vera answered softly. "Then they will ask her what she knows, and what she doesn't know." Silence followed. Then footsteps moved downward. Anna stepped back. Her heart felt as though it had been struck once sharply. Mid-afternoon, she walked to school early and lingered near the entrance. Snow had begun to drift in slow circles. When the children emerged, she kept her voice calm. "We're going home quickly today. No stopping." Misha asked why. She squeezed his hand but said nothing. As they approached the building, she noticed a man standing near the side entrance, not the main stairwell. Gray coat, same height, same rigid posture. He wasn't watching the street. He was watching the building. Kolya stopped. "That's him," he whispered. The man's gaze shifted slightly when they passed, but he didn't follow. He stood as if marking their return, noting the time, the direction, the rhythm of their day. Inside the apartment, warmth returned from the radiators, though Anna felt none of it. She made soup for the boys and waited. When Sergei returned that evening, snow clung to his shoulders. He stopped immediately upon seeing her expression. "What happened?" "A letter," she said. "From the bureau." He froze, not visibly, not dramatically, but in the smallest way, shoulders stilling, breath pausing. He removed his gloves slowly. "You opened it?" "Yes." He reached for the envelope, but she held it in her hands, refusing to give it over. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but calculation. "They want to ask about household details," he said. "You'll answer the basics. They asked for documents. Then bring the obvious ones. Nothing more." She watched him closely. "Why me? Why now?" Sergei closed his briefcase and set it by the wall. He didn't answer her question. Instead, he glanced toward the children's room, then lowered his voice. "You must not mention anything unusual. Not the letters, not the photograph, not the man in the stairwell." The precision of his instructions confirmed what she had feared. He knew about the man. Perhaps he always had. And the committee, she asked quietly. "I'll handle them." His voice tightened. But the Bureau is different. They ask because they already suspect. They listen for contradictions. Her fingertips went cold. Contradictions like the ones on your papers. He didn't speak. The silence in the room thickened. When he finally turned toward the bedroom, she saw something unmistakable in his face. Not guilt, not fear, but resignation. The look of someone who had anticipated this moment for far too long. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at the table with the summons letter open beside her, reading its lines as if the meaning might shift with each pass. Around midnight, the stairwell door slammed below. Voices murmured briefly, then faded. Someone walked up a few steps, paused, and retreated. A watcher, or a messenger, or both. Hours later, as the building slept, Anna realized the truth she had been circling tomorrow's interview was not about clarifying anything. It was about determining whether she could be trusted at all. The morning of the security interview began in a narrow corridor that smelled faintly of cold stone and old paper. The building itself was unmarked, a gray block with identical windows and a single metal door. Anna arrived precisely at the appointed time, clutching her identification documents so tightly the edges pressed into her palm. Inside, a woman in a dark uniform guided her down a hallway without speaking. The walls were bare except for a bulletin board of outdated notices. A single radiator clicked uneasily. The woman opened a door and motioned for Anna to step inside. The room contained a table, 2 chairs, and nothing else. Light from a high window fell across the table, leaving most of the corners in shadow. A man entered moments later carrying a thin folder. He sat opposite her, placed the folder between them, and opened it with slow, deliberate movements. "Anna Petrovna," he said. "Thank you for coming." His voice held no warmth, no hostility, only function. He looked down at the folder for a long moment before continuing. "We have some questions regarding your household," he said. "These questions are routine, but routine questions didn't require interviews in unmarked buildings. Routine questions didn't come with handwritten notes delivered by frightened children. Routine questions didn't arrive after days of strange men in stairwells." "Yes," Anna said quietly. He slid a paper toward her. "Your husband's workplace has discrepancies in reported hours. Can you confirm his usual departure times?" She studied the paper before answering. She recognized the log entries Sergei had shown her, the ones too neat, too perfect. The document in front of her was different entries, varied, inconsistent, some crossed out. A second log, conflicting with the first. "I can tell you the times he leaves home," she said carefully, "but not where he goes." "That's not what we're asking," the man replied. He tapped the logs. "We're asking what you observe." He watched her closely. Every hesitation mattered. "He leaves early," Anna said. "Sometimes before dawn. Sometimes later. I don't know his exact schedule. Do you know the nature of his work? He works in a ministry office." The man leaned back slightly. "That is what the documents say." He closed the folder. "But we are not interested in documents today. We are interested in patterns." The words settled in the air heavily. Before she could respond, another official stepped into the room and whispered something into the interrogator's ear. The man nodded. When he turned back to Anna, the tone of the interview shifted subtly. "Have you ever seen unfamiliar individuals waiting near your stairwell?" he asked. Her hand tightened around her ID papers. Someone had reported the man in the gray coat, or perhaps the Bureau already knew. "I've seen people I don't recognize," she said. "But it's a large building." "Have any approached you? No. Have any spoken to your children?" Her stomach dropped. "Not that I know of." The man watched her for a long moment, then folded his hands. "Your husband is involved in tasks requiring discretion," he said. "You understand this?" It wasn't a question. She forced a nod. Your own discretion, he continued, is therefore important. Do not discuss today's meeting with neighbors. Do not speculate. Do not compare documents. Simply continue your routines. The warning beneath his words was unmistakable. He closed the file. You may go. No explanation, no signature, no record she could take with her. Just dismissal. Outside, the cold struck her sharply as if the air itself was withholding something. She pulled her coat tight and walked without direction at first, just breathing, grounding herself. She memorized the route back not for her own sake, but because she sensed the bureau might expect her to remember. By the time she reached the school, snow had begun to fall again. Kolya and Misha ran to her eagerly, unaware of the tremor in her hands. She took them home, forcing steadiness into her steps. Inside the apartment, the warmth felt misplaced. She removed her coat and paused. The chair near the window, the one Sergei used, had shifted again while she was gone, angled slightly toward the radiator this time. The curtain was not drawn as she had left it, and Sergei's briefcase, always placed carefully against the wall, now sat on the table. He entered from the bedroom quietly. You're home earlier than expected. They finished quickly, she said. He studied her face. Did they ask about me? Yes. What did you tell them? The truth, she said. That I don't know anything. He exhaled once, not relief, but calculation. Good. She stepped closer. Sergei. What do they want from us? He didn't answer at first. He glanced toward the door, then back to her. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened in a way she hadn't heard in years. They want to know whether you can be trusted. Her breath caught, and whether he added quietly, you can keep trusting me. A silence opened between them, deep and cold as the snowy courtyard. She did not look away. She couldn't. In the stairwell outside, footsteps rose, paused at their landing, then continued upward, slowly, deliberately, as if marking who was home and who wasn't. It felt less like surveillance now, and more like preparation. The next morning felt heavier than the ones before it, as if the building itself had absorbed the tension and now pressed it back into every room. Anna woke before the children again and went to the window. Snow drifted in thin sheets across the courtyard. The lamps flickered faintly, struggling against the gray light. She wrapped her shawl tighter and moved to the kitchen table where the summons from the bureau still lay folded beside the committee letter. She hadn't told Sergei everything about the interview. Not the second official whispering in the corner, not the contradictory logs placed in front of her, not the way the interrogator stressed the importance of her patterns. She kept these pieces folded inside her as though revealing them might provoke a shift she could not control. Sergei left unusually early that day. He didn't touch breakfast. He didn't look at her for more than a moment. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed felt like an echo that didn't fade. After walking the children to school, she returned to the apartment, but she couldn't stay still. Every sound from the stairwell tightened something in her chest. She stepped out and descended one flight, then another, checking whether anyone lingered in the shadows. On the third-floor landing, she heard a door open behind her. Vera stepped out, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. "You're restless today," Vera said quietly. Anna didn't answer. Vera's voice softened. "Someone asked me questions yesterday, not the committee. They wanted to know if your husband keeps unusual hours, if he receives visitors." Anna felt the air thin. "What did you say? I told them only what the building already knows?" She paused. "You should be careful. When there are questions, they spread quickly." Anna nodded tightly and continued down the stairs. She couldn't trust Vera, at least not now. Not with what she had seen, and not with what was coming. Outside, she crossed the courtyard and walked toward the postal kiosk. The snow crunched beneath her boots in the stillness. As she approached, a man stepped from behind the kiosk. Not the man in the gray coat, someone else older wearing a heavy cap pulled low. He stopped a short distance away, not blocking her path, but not moving aside either. "Anna Petrovna?" he asked. Her breath caught. "Yes." He glanced around the courtyard before speaking again. "Come with me. There are things you need to understand." I don't know who you are." He nodded once as if expecting the hesitation. "I'm not here to harm you. I'm here because the Bureau won't tell you everything, and because your husband won't either." Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Why me?" "Because you found things," he said, "more than you were supposed to." Her mind raced. The visitor pass, the 2 keys, the surveillance negatives, the maps, the photograph, the contradictory documents. He gestured toward a narrow alley. "Just a few minutes. Then you can return." Every instinct told her to walk away. But something else, something colder and clearer, told her that refusing might be more dangerous. She followed. They stopped beside a service entrance, partially hidden from view. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder taped along the edges, worn from handling. He held it out to her. "This," he said, "is part of the file." She did not take it immediately. "What file?" "Your husband's. His operational dossier." Air seemed to drain from her lungs. "He works for a ministry." The man's eyes softened with something like pity. "He works for them," he said quietly. "For the Cheka's successor offices. For the organs." Her fingers shook as she accepted the folder. It was lighter than she expected. Inside were several pages, typewritten profiles, observation notes, photographs. Some she recognized, the same compounds, the same structures from the negatives. But others showed rooms, faces, lists of names. She turned a page and froze. There was a report mentioning interrogations conducted in their district with dates overlapping nights. Sergei had come home late, exhausted, and silent. Another page detailed surveillance assignments in residential buildings. One section was marked with a red line, "Household proximity useful for cover." She felt her knees weaken. "He was assigned to us," she whispered. "To this building." The man exhaled. "At first, yes. Then his duties expanded. But the building remained part of his origin profile." Her throat tightened painfully. "Did he choose this?" The man hesitated before answering. "Your husband was committed to his work, but the line between commitment and coercion is thin in these matters." She stared at the folder, unable to speak. "You need to understand," the man continued, "that the Bureau's interest in you now is not merely procedural. They want to know whether you've seen too much." She closed the folder slowly. Her hands felt numb. "When they ask again," he said, "and they will, you must be careful. Silence is sometimes safer than truth." He nodded once, then stepped back into the snowfall, disappearing behind the kiosk as quickly as he had appeared. Anna stood alone in the alley, gripping the file as if it might dissolve. She knew she could not bring it home. She tucked it beneath her coat, shielding it from sight, and returned to the courtyard with steady, purposeful steps. Inside the apartment, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. The briefcase sat where Sergei had left it, the table illuminated by cold midday light. She hid the file in the lining of her coat, deep enough that even a hurried search might miss it. As she stood there, a new realization pressed itself into her awareness. Quiet, devastating, certain. She had not discovered the truth by accident. She had discovered it because the walls around her had already begun to close. Footsteps echoed faintly from the stairwell, slow stopping just outside their door. And she understood they were no longer watching Sergei alone. They were watching her. Anna didn't hear the footsteps leave. They lingered outside the door long enough for her pulse to sync with their rhythm, then faded upward, as though whoever stood there had decided to continue the inspection elsewhere. But the echo remained in her chest long after the stairwell fell silent again. She moved toward the window and checked the courtyard. The snow had thickened, blurring outlines of figures crossing between the buildings. A woman dragged a sled. A man smoked beneath the overhang. No one looked unusual, yet everything felt charged. Every movement seemed aware of itself. By early afternoon, her nerves had thinned to threads. She checked the children's room twice, rearranged the dishes unnecessarily, opened the wardrobe only to close it again. The file the stranger had given her lay hidden deep within her coat, lining its weight, shaping every thought. She had read it only once, but certain sentences now rewrote the last 10 years of her life. At dusk, the door latch rattled. Sergei stepped in, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked untethered, as if he had walked for hours without direction rather than returned from work. His cheeks were flushed with cold, but his eyes carried a dim, heavy vacancy. He removed his gloves slowly. "You're home." Anna nodded. She waited for him to remove the briefcase to set it down with the same precision he used every day. But tonight, he hesitated. His hand lingered on the clasp. She stepped closer. Sergei. His gaze flickered weary and sharp at once. "They'll come again," he said. "The Bureau. Maybe the committee, too." She waited. "They're trying to verify who knows what," he continued. "Whether I've said too much, whether you've seen anything." Her throat tightened. "Have you—" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of papers, loose, unorganized, some crumpled at the edges. He set them on the table and sorted them quickly. Not for her benefit, this was a ritual of efficiency, a muscle memory from long before he met her. "What are those?" Anna asked. Nothing, he said. Just records. She recognized the tone, the final barrier before truth or collapse. He sifted through the pages, resting his thumb on one particular sheet. Then, in a motion too calm for what it meant, he tore the paper once, twice again, until it lay in small fragments across the table. "You shouldn't see this," he said. He destroyed the second page, then a third, each rip slow and decisive. These were not ordinary papers. They had a rhythm to them, a cadence of deletion. Anna watched silently as he worked the room, filling with the quiet ripping of a life unwritten. She stepped closer. "Let me help." Sergei stopped. His hand froze mid-tear. He looked up at her for a long time, the weight of years suspended in his expression. "You don't understand," he whispered. "If you touch any of this, they'll assume you knew." Her breath caught. "Then you should tell me what it is you're protecting." He shook his head almost imperceptibly. "I can't." A deeper truth hung behind the words. "I won't." The last page he tore was thicker photographic paper. She glimpsed part of a face before it split into pieces. He swept the fragments into an envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. A sharp knock sounded from the stairwell one floor down. A door creaked open, followed by the murmur of voices. Something administrative. Something ritualized. Sergei stiffened. "They're visiting apartments," he said, voice low. "Checking records. Confirming occupants." Anna listened. The voices rose and fell, moving methodically from one door to the next, like a slow, inevitable tide climbing the building. Sergei moved quickly. He pulled out the chair near the window and straightened it. He adjusted his coat on the hook. He placed the briefcase neatly against the wall. These were habits of someone expecting inspection, not hiding, not fleeing, but preparing for an official eye. He turned toward her. "When they ask what you know of me," he said quietly, "tell them only the surface. Tell them what a wife should know. Leave the rest empty." "Empty," she whispered. "It's safer." She took a step closer. "Is it safe for you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, brushing her arm lightly. A touch filled, not with affection, but with apology. The voices grew louder. A knock struck the door below theirs, then another. Sergei backed away from her, moving toward the children's room as if rehearsing a version of domestic normalcy. Anna's breath slowed. She reached into her coat, feeling the hidden file, its edges sharp against her palm. She could show it, expose the truth, break whatever shadow he lived in. But the children's laughter drifted faintly from behind their door, and she understood what silence was meant to protect. Moments later, the knock came firm, official, inevitable. Anna opened the door. 2 officers stood in the corridor, snow melting on their boots. One held a clipboard. The other scanned the interior of the apartment with a practiced sweep. "Routine verification," the taller officer said. "May we enter?" Sergei appeared beside her, posture, steady face, unreadable. Anna stepped aside, letting them in, her hand still pressed against her coat lining where the file lay hidden, both shield and weapon depending on the moment she chose to speak. That moment had not arrived. Not yet. The officers moved through the apartment with the methodical quiet of men accustomed to entering rooms where secrets lived. They spoke little, conferred only with glances. One checked identification documents. The other studied the arrangement of furniture, the angles of doors, the distances between ordinary objects, as though truth might be measured in centimeters. Anna stood beside Sergei, hands clasped lightly in front of her, steady only because she forced them to be. The children watched from their room, half hidden behind the doorframe. She wanted to send them away, but she didn't dare move. The taller officer paused at the kitchen table. "These are your household documents?" "Yes," she said. "All routine." His eyes settled on her a moment longer than necessary. Not suspicious, evaluating. Weighing. He turned to Sergei. "You've missed 2 prior committee inquiries." Sergei's jaw tensed. "My work required it. That work is under review," the smaller officer said. "As is your status." The sentence hung in the air, crisp and final. They finished their inspection in silence, then stepped into the hallway. The taller one handed Anna a sealed envelope. "Sign here." She did. Her hand barely shook. The officers left without further explanation. The envelope's weight felt wrong, neither light nor heavy, but solid, conclusive. Sergei closed the door and leaned against it, eyes closed for a moment. "Let me see it." Anna didn't move. "What is it?" He opened his eyes. The expression he wore was one she had seen only once before, years ago, when a colleague of his disappeared without warning. A look that mixed resignation with something more fragile. "Anna," he said softly. "Please." She handed him the envelope. He tore it open with a precision that betrayed no emotion. Then he read. Once, twice, a third time. Finally, he handed it back. "They're relocating us." The word struck her harder than she expected. Relocating. Why? For security reasons. He said the phrase the way someone might recite an oath they no longer believed. They don't want questions. They want control. But where, she asked? A provincial district. They don't specify. They'll escort us. Her breath caught. When? Within the week. She stared at him. "Because of your work?" A long silence. "Yes," he said. "And because of what you've learned." The room seemed to tilt around her. "I didn't tell them anything. That doesn't matter. They assume knowledge spreads through proximity." She sank onto the couch. Snow tapped against the window in soft bursts. The children whispered in the hallway, but neither came closer. Sergei moved to the window and looked down at the courtyard. "It's already begun." She joined him. Below, Vera stood near the entrance with 2 committee members. Their coats were dusted with fresh snow, their postures stiff. One held a folder, thick white, unmistakably official. They weren't here for a visit. They were delivering a judgment. Sergei closed the curtain before she could see more. They'll vote to expel us. Tonight. Before curfew. She pressed her hand against the radiator for balance. The warmth felt thin, temporary. What will happen to the children? She asked. They'll come with us. And your work. He hesitated just enough to confirm the truth. They'll change my assignment. To what? He exhaled. Something that removes questions. Something quieter. She didn't want to know what quieter meant in the language of the organs. A sudden knock snapped through the apartment, sharp, urgent, 3 times in quick succession. Not the officers. Not a neighbor. Sergei stiffened. Stay here. As he opened the door, the hallway light revealed Vera, her face tense with something between fear and triumph. The committee has reached a decision, she said. Your family is to prepare for departure. Immediately. Anna stepped forward. We have children. That's precisely why we're acting quickly, Vera said, avoiding Anna's eyes. Disruptions are harmful. Sergei's voice was low. You've been waiting for this. Vera flinched but recovered quickly. We all want stability. Your situation has become incompatible with the building's security expectations. Footsteps echoed from below, multiple people climbing slow and synchronized. Committee members, possibly more. Vera stepped back. Gather your things. We'll return with the formal record. She left without meeting Anna's gaze. When the door closed, the apartment suddenly felt smaller, as though the walls had drawn inward to press them out. Sergei turned to her. Get the boys' coats. You said we had a week. He shook his head. That's for the bureau. The building wants us gone tonight. She felt the cold edge of panic rise but forced it down. She walked to the children's room, steadied her voice, and told them to pack their school bags quickly. In the living room, Sergei knelt beside his briefcase. He opened it, removed several folders she had never seen, and began tearing pages with the same grim efficiency as the night before. Bits of paper fell like snow across the floor. Sergei, she whispered, what were you really doing? He froze, a torn fragment in his hand. Later, he said, when we're away from here, it may already be too late for later. He didn't deny it. The stairwell filled with voices again, closer now, purposeful, unified. Committee members, building monitors, possibly bureau observers. Anna gathered the children. Sergei stood closing the briefcase for the final time. His face carried a quiet determination she couldn't read. A second knock came louder, more insistent. This time they couldn't ignore it. They were out of time. The committee entered first 3 members in heavy coats, their faces stiff with official purpose. Behind them came 2 men from the bureau, their presence quiet but unmistakable. Snow clung to their boots, melting onto the apartment floor in slow, widening circles. Anna stood with the children beside the coat rack. Sergei remained by the table, his briefcase closed, his posture straight. No one spoke at first. The air felt brittle, as though one careless word might cause everything around them to splinter. The committee chair cleared his throat. Petrov family, by order of the District Residency Board and in cooperation with state security, your household is to be relocated tonight. He handed Sergei a document thin, stamped without appeal. Sergei didn't look at it long. He folded it once and slipped it inside his coat. You have 15 minutes, the chair added. A transport will be waiting. Anna felt Misha's hand slip into hers. His fingers were cold. Kolya stood, rigid eyes darting between the adults as if he might decode the situation from posture alone. She took the boys to their room and helped them gather clothes, 1 extra shirt each, their winter socks, the workbook Kolya insisted on bringing. She let them keep it. The weight of refusal felt unnecessary now. From the doorway, she saw the men in the living room. The committee murmured among themselves. The bureau officers remained still, taking in the apartment with unreadable expressions as though marking each detail for a file. The older officer stepped toward Sergei. "You will report to the administrative office in your new district. Assignment will follow." Sergei nodded once. Anna couldn't stop thinking about the file hidden in her coat lining, a secret the bureau didn't know she held, a secret Sergei didn't know she possessed. She wondered if that knowledge alone made her dangerous or merely temporary. She zipped the children's bags with steady hands. When they returned to the living room, Sergei took one bag from her and slung it over his shoulder. He looked at her briefly with an expression she had not seen in years, an apology without words. The committee stepped aside. "Come." The hallway was colder than the apartment. Doors cracked open as neighbors watched the procession. Some faces showed curiosity, others disapproval, others merely relief that it wasn't them. Vera stood near her door, arms crossed tightly. She didn't speak. Her gaze flicked to Anna's coat, perhaps searching for guilt, perhaps for confirmation. Anna held her eyes only for a moment before guiding the children down the stairs. Outside, the snow had thickened into a curtain. A black government car waited near the courtyard gate. Its engine idled softly, a muted growl beneath the wind. As they approached, one bureau officer opened the rear door. "You'll sit together," he said. Anna ushered the boys inside. Sergei hesitated only long enough to turn back toward the building. The courtyard lamps cast long shadows across the snow. For a moment he seemed to be searching for something, a sign, a memory, a farewell he couldn't speak. Then he got in beside her, closing the door with a quiet finality. The car pulled away. The building receded through the fogged window, a gray monolith watching them leave. For years she had thought it was a place of beginning their marriage, their children's first steps, their daily routines. Now it looked stripped of familiarity, its windows blank and indifferent. Misha fell asleep against her sleeve. Kolya sat upright, eyes fixed on the road. Sergei's hand rested on his knee, unmoving. After several minutes, Anna spoke quietly. "How long have you been with them?" He didn't answer. Not immediately. The snow hissed against the windows. "I was assigned before we married," he said finally. "Part of a domestic observation network. They placed me where they needed eyes." His voice was low, the words measured. "Your building was considered stable, predictable." "And us?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "You were expected to remain uninvolved." She looked down at the sleeping children. "But I wasn't." "No," he said. "You weren't." Silence settled between them again, heavy but honest in a way their home had never allowed. After an hour, the city thinned. The outskirts stretched wide and pale. Somewhere ahead, the road would branch toward the provincial district noted in their relocation order, a place without history for them, without vigilance perhaps, but not without shadows. Anna pressed her palm against the inner lining of her coat. The file shifted slightly. She imagined its pages waiting, quiet, patient, unfinished. "Will they let us stay there?" she asked. "For a time," Sergei replied, "until they're certain the questions are contained. And after that," he looked out at the snow, "after that depends on silence." Anna nodded. She understood. The story of their family was now shaped less by truth than by what would remain unsaid. The car continued along the darkening road. The children slept. The snow fell heavier, and in the muted hum of the engine, Anna felt a strange, hollow certainty settle within her. She would never fully know the life Sergei had lived in the shadows. He would never fully know what she had discovered in the light. And the state its letters, its watchers, its quiet decisions would never release them from the consequences of proximity. She leaned her head against the cold window, watching the last lights of the city disappear behind them. The road ahead was white, empty, and endless.